Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Sales is King. Dan Sixsmith, glad to be with you. We're doing a video on YouTube and LinkedIn as we're doing this and recording it for the podcast. And happy to be with you guys in 2021. This is our first episode of the year. Hopefully things are going well, and glad to be with you. Want to thank you for your support, your listenership and followership, all the emails and reach outs and instant messages that folks have sent in over the years. We're now starting our, 2017, 18, 19, 20. So this is going to be our 5th year of the podcast, and so excited to be with you today. So again, we're working in challenging times in terms of sales and selling. But on the flip side, we're also seeing more opportunity than there's ever been before. Everything is on the table. Companies are looking at change, and they're accelerating the rate and pace of change, which means that all conversations are open for discussion. So your prospecting should be definitely on target. You should be all over the companies that you're looking to work with, finding the right prospects, standing out, and engaging in whatever manner you can do to get folks to the table. But today I want to talk about a key element of our sales game and of our closing game, and that's what I call selling urgency. And what do I mean by that? Oftentimes when we're in deals, we're working with prospects, we're moving them along, the buyer's journey, the decision cycle. But more often than not, it's always a timing issue, right? We're trying to get them to meet our deadline, our timing. We want them to buy sooner rather than later. So how do we maneuver in such a way that we can bring these deals over the goal line in a timely fashion? And I think by definition, people like to delay, particularly on big decisions. There's a status quo bias, but I think that status quo bias is definitely taken a hit with the whole pandemic. The status quo has probably taken the biggest hit it's ever had in a long, long time in terms of the pandemic. So how do we sell urgency? How do we move prospects along and get them to pull the trigger now versus several months down the line? And, I've often referred to some research by Objective Management Group. If you don't follow those guys, you should. Great group. They've done millions of salesperson assessments. So they know exactly what's going on in terms of strengths and weaknesses of sellers today. And so one of the key things, if they look at the profile of B2B sellers today, there's 3 different elements that they're looking at. Number one is, how effective are these folks in asking discovery questions, going in and trying to uncover issues and challenges. And the good news is that 80% of sellers, according to Objective Management Group, are proficient at doing that. Then the next step is, so from there, how do we take the challenges we've uncovered and then tie them back to the solutions that we provide? And it's a big drop off in proficiency from there. Only 33% are proficient at tying the challenges to the benefits that the seller can provide, which is obviously a big problem, right? But then it goes one step further and it says, how proficient are sales reps at demonstrating the ability to get the prospect to buy now versus later, right? And that number drops all the way down to 12%. So selling urgency is an area that most of us need to really shore up in order to improve our sales game. And I want to walk through a number of great ideas that came up on a LinkedIn thread this week, where a number of experts put their 2 cents in terms of, how do we move the prospect along in a timely fashion? What can you do to stimulate interest now versus later? And, I'll start with one that we've talked about quite a bit here on the podcast, and what we talk about in my organization is highlighting the cost of inaction or the cost of doing nothing. My friend Jerry Acuff, he's been on twice on the podcast. Jerry, that's JerryAcuff. Follow him if you don't. He's one of the top 5 sales consultants in the world, and a super nice guy. And he's been around a long time, and he's got a great following. But Jerry Acuff says, he calls it, what are the economic consequences of not solving the problem or the challenge? This is the kind of approach you need to take with the prospect. And what I call it is actually turning the tables on risk. So at the end of the day, you need to show the prospect that there's more risk actually in the status quo and what they're doing today versus the newer solution, your solution, and investing the money with you. And we can do that very successfully by detailing the cost of the status quo, showing them what it's costing them each and every month that they delay. And we have tools that do that. And you can hit me up if you want to talk about that, dan.sixsmith@gmail.com. But we've got a methodology, we've got tools that help you with that. But that's critical, right? You must be able to quantify and show that prospect that, okay, well, you want to wait another 3 or 4 months and then regroup. Well, it's costing you $350,000 a month and several $1 million for you to wait. Did you know that? And are you willing to take that risk? Are you willing to take the continued risk of the status quo? So super important. Number one, quantifying the cost of the status quo. Excellent. So I wanted to talk through some of the great additional comments that came up on the LinkedIn thread. One is, can you walk me through what happens if we don't make this change by the end of the month, for example? I love this because you get the prospect to discuss, how important is this really? What will happen? Besides the economic consequences that we talk about, what are the personal consequences, right? Are there certain objectives that this stakeholder needs to fulfill by a certain time? Everything to me in all of the calls I'm sitting on today, time is of the essence. Speed, I'm hearing very few companies say, we're early in the process, we've got tons of time here. Everybody's looking to pull the trigger. They're trying to make a decision. But helping the prospect walk you through what happens if they don't do this, I think is great, because you put it back on them to explain and verbalize why it's important now. So I love that. The next thing is, of course, and this is a basic, and I'm sure you all do it, but working backward on the timeline, right? From when the customer, the prospect wants to roll this out. So maybe it's a 2 or 3 month development cycle. They're looking to, roll it out in XYZ month. Well, what that means is you'd have to really buy the product 3 months prior in order for us to make the delivery. So, and going a step further, there's one great example where you actually put together a buying chart for the buyer, for the prospect, walk them through the different steps to do effective discovery on what their buying process is, right? After this initial call and demo, who else needs to be involved? Will there be one additional demo required, 3 or 4 additional demos required? Which stakeholders need to be in? Who are the decision makers? Who are the budget holders? What does their procurement process look like? Is it more of a formality, or are we expected to negotiate with them after we negotiate with you, new vendor setup, onboarding. All this stuff needs to be outlined and then presented back to the prospect so that you could put a mutually beneficial process together that you can both stick to, versus kind of having that first call, setting up an ad hoc follow-up, not entirely sure of what's going to happen next or when it's going to happen. Being really buttoned down in terms of this process, I think, is great. And one of the experts had sent me a great chart, which we can walk through. I actually want to have him on the podcast to walk us through. Another great question. Hey, I'm curious, we could have worked together 6 months ago. We could have even worked together 2 years down the line. What was it that led you to want to get in touch with us today? Great question, right? Why are you reaching out today? What's the urgency? What's going on in your company that led you to reach out to us today? Right then and there, you're going to get a sense of what's important, why it's important now, and it's something that you're going to use back later on when you're trying to get this deal moved forward in a timely fashion. So I like this very much. Someone else talks about the personal pain and the business pain and how delays will amplify this, and I like that, and it's kind of an offshoot of what we've mentioned a little bit earlier. But certainly the business pain are the the challenges, the initiatives the company is facing. What's going on that's for example, how are they impacted by COVID? How was 2020? How are they going to grow in 2021? But also, buying is an emotional process as well, right? So we've talked about the stakeholders' emotional commitment. What's important to them? Why do they need this? Is this their pet project? Is this their baby? What does his or her boss think about that? Or is it their pet project? Or is this something that, there isn't agreement, within the prospect organization? And then we start working on, how do we build consensus and help the prospects build consensus? So I love that one as well. That's a great one. What's the personal payoff for the stakeholder? I love that, right? So what is the payoff? Is it a raise, a promotion? Is it hitting a target, a strategic bonus type target? Good to know. It really requires getting to know the prospect well, establishing trust with them, that they could share that with you. And again, many of the articles talk about sellers setting themselves up as an extension of the company, of that buying committee. Your expertise, your subject matter expertise will build trust. Demonstrating that you've done this for millions of other companies, hundreds of other companies, is important. So I think that's excellent as well. Another great line was, do you think you'll be ready to make a decision the next time we meet? Well, I love that. It's just throwing the cards right on the table. It's asking, bluntly where they are in the process. Will they be ready to potentially make a decision on the next call? Or is this something that's just going to drag out? That will help you know how to navigate. So that's a good one. Another one comes from, a different podcast that I listened to on the Brad Lee Dropping Bombs podcast. And it's Michael Burt, who's a great sales coach. And he basically says, I can't help you until you commit, because a lot of times we talk and talk and talk, and, we cover subjects upside down and around and inside and out, but eventually, we can't help you until you commit. We can't give you the solution until you commit. We can't deliver our sales, our expertise, right? Our team, our delivery team, our thought leadership, our IP. We can't do that until you commit. So you have to commit, and you have to commit sooner rather than later. So I love that. And then, the other thing is to think about how much time you're going to invest before you finally have to say, hey, it's time to pull the trigger. We've had 10 meetings. We've had everyone within the organization, walk you through what we can do. You know, we're at the point of committing now, or forever hold your peace, right? So I like that a lot. You know, I like whiteboarding out this, you know, buying plan, buyer's plan, and timeline. I think that's great. Let me just see if there's anything else that was of interest. Certainly, you know, justifying the investment, which I think is a great one, building a business case, which is another thing we do, and we help you with. You know, justifying the investment helps, right? So if it has a favorable ROI, if there's a significant benefit dollar amount that is mapped to a top challenge or goal or initiative, we can highlight that, and the prospect will be more inclined to pull his team together and get this done sooner rather than later. So the numbers matter a lot, you know, the numbers that they're costing themselves each month, and the numbers in terms of the benefits that they're going to achieve. So I think that's great. Let's see. Yep. So I think this is all good. Others talk about, you know, understanding the peak seasons, if there are peak seasons for your prospects. Those are all, to me, kind of impending events. Is it a sales kickoff? Is it a marketing campaign? Is it a rollout of a particular line? You know, if you're in retail or things of that nature. And it comes back to kind of understanding the prospect's situation, right? Really understanding all of the issues very well to be able to navigate. And again, as someone else said, it's important that the prospect trusts you that you're doing this for them, which is really what you're doing. You know, you want to get it in their hands sooner rather than later so that they can begin achieving the benefits right away, right? Obviously, it benefits me, the seller, because I want the deal soon. You know, I want the commission, I want the money, but ultimately we have to be selfless and focus on the buyer, their timeline, but how we both win by getting them the solution sooner rather than later. If it comes across like, hey, we're going to discount this, it's end of quarter, you know, I could care less about you, we got to get this deal in the door, there's going to be less inclination for the prospect to do that. So think about that. The other great thing to think about is, you know, as we're building that plan out, the buying plan, you know, what does the new vendor onboarding look like, right? Is that a 2-week process? Is that a 2-month process? I recently had you know, a great experience with a new logo that we brought on, and my stakeholder was very, very upfront that the process was going to be very lengthy and very detailed. But you know, we worked in parallel and we worked early on it, and that's one thing I would, you know, suggest. You know, asking the prospect, can we start to work now on the paperwork? You know, on the master agreements or on the security docs or whatever is important, on the new vendor onboarding docs. Let's get that done now. You know, let us work on this. We don't mind investing the time, you know, in order to save you and us time later on to do it. So I like that very much. And then, you know, one other person talks about just, you know, just being candid and straightforward. You know, I mean, I think that's, you know, as a general practice, I think that's a given. But, you know, being open and honest with the prospect, you know, walking them through what you need to do on your end and, you know, what they'll need to do on theirs in order to make things happen. And the great thing about this too, in this selling urgency, is if it's done right, you can actually improve your pipeline. You'll be able to weed out some of the, you know, the charlatans, for lack of a better word, the tire kickers, you know, people that are not far enough along, that are not ready to make a decision, that might not have the authority. And you'll know, and you'll be able to focus on other deals that are more important. So good opening session of the year. Really happy to be back. Think about selling urgency. Think about, you know, how do you leverage some of these tactics and approaches and make them second nature. You know, how do you put together a document that you and the buyer will follow along all the way through close? I think they'll really appreciate that, because oftentimes buyers are thrown in. There's a lot of folks that haven't bought before. They don't know the right questions to ask internally. And it can cost you and them a lot of time and money. So think about selling urgency. Think about how we get better from that 12% of us only that can sell urgency effectively. How do we drive those numbers up? Let's keep talking about this, but let's have a great year together. Let's keep working hard in this very challenging environment, but an environment that is fraught not only with difficulties, but also with major opportunities. So looking forward to talking again. Have a good one.